chat where you are located, where you're from, where you are tuning in. So I'm in Mexico City. It's very early right now, it's 9 a.m. So let us know where you are. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Hello, Camille from Morocco. We have a lot of people from Morocco, actually. That's great. And Thomas from Germany. Hello, hello, hello. And so welcome everyone. I'm very excited for this session, as I mentioned before. My name is Sophia. I'm part of the core team of Code for All. And I want to say welcome to Code for All's 2021 Summit. The session you've joined today is called Democracy and Tech, Stories from the Code for All Network. And it's all about civic tech projects from different members of the network that promote and safeguard democracy. This is a panel discussion. It's going to be broadcasted live. And what we want to do is to keep the conversation flowing and to make it more like if we were having coffee instead of just like in a Zoom room and a panel. So what we're going to do is we're going to, each speaker is going to present their projects, and then we're going to have some sort of discussion around some questions. So I invite you that throughout the session, you can leave your questions and thoughts in the Q&A box. I'm going to be reading them out loud. And yeah, so just join the conversation. Let us know what you think and what have been also your experiences around democracy and tech. And with that having said, I'm going to introduce our speakers today. I have with me Colombina Schaeffer from Ciudadanía Inteligente. I love when they are names in Spanish. Hal Seki from Code for Japan, Alma Rangel from Codeando Mexico, and M. Burnett from Code for America. Thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you, thank you. And I think the best way to start this conversation would be to share your thoughts and your project, your organization's work around democracy and tech. And I'm gonna start with M, if that's okay with you.
Sure. I have a very short slide deck. I'm going to try to keep it to 5 minutes, if that's okay. So we at the Code for America Brigade Network, so I'm a senior community manager on the network team, deal with the volunteer side of our organization. And we did a pilot of the Decidim tool, which I think we're not the only ones who are going to talk about this tool in particular. I'll introduce a little bit of the process itself. So starting this past year, we've engaged with what's called the Network Revisioning Project. And this is a very large project. It's kind of looking at how our network makes change in the world. And we launched the Decidim pilot as a way of practicing our values. And our network has a long history of promoting open source and of kind of wanting to be more participatory in how we make decisions. So we decided to work with Open Source Politics. They're a great partner in this regard. They helped us kind of launch our Decidim instance and use this tool to help engage the network in the process. On the right is a screenshot of what it looks like. It's been a really helpful way to have participants be able to see everything about a very complex process. What is getting decided? What's the timing? What phase are we in? How can I get involved? It's been really helpful for that. And I'll go into that a little bit more. One thing about Decidim that's very nice is it's flexible. So each process, you kind of have building blocks that you pick and choose to use. Our building blocks were kind of basic. We used meetings and kind of an overview of the project. We also use poll lists, which might come into this discussion with other panelists too. And that's sort of a way of soliciting ideas from the crowd and then seeing where sentiments lie. We're also continuing to use Decidim. We're actually using it for an upcoming conference. And I think there's a lot more that we'd like to explore in the future. Overall, though, I think that some of the lessons that we've learned is that was kind of an ambitious project to tackle, introducing these like new decision-making tools. If I were to do it again, I would do it with a much smaller project. And I think that one element that comes in here that's really important is for participants to be able to see how their participation actually helps shape the outcome. In this process, this was a really large process. There's not one decision being made, but 10 or 20 or 30. And it's sometimes difficult for a participant to place themselves in the process like that. So I think something that's more defined, you're maybe making one decision, would be a great way to start with a tool like this. With any new tech tool, of course, like introducing and nurturing early adopters is important. So I think I would do that more going forward. And then also, I think we've all experienced the changes of the pandemic and having to be more online and more asynchronous with our networks, and understanding how a new tool for decision making fits in with existing tools was really important. And then, of course, I alongside working with Code for America, I also have a background in political technology and local political organizing. And I think what I see with local government sometimes is that they want to introduce a nicer process or a nicer tool for a process, but not ultimately change how power operates. I think that for some of these, if participants don't have a little bit more power, then they're not likely to engage more. So I think that's an important element to incorporate into any new kind of democracy tool, is defining what power a participant actually has to change the outcome. So those are some of the lessons, and I'm really excited to talk with you all about what you learned and just more about the topic in general. And I will stop my screen share.
Thanks, Am. Actually, like one of my questions is like, what are some of the lessons that you learned? So I hope that we can dive into that. I'm gonna pass it over to Colombina.
Hi. Thank you for having Ciudadanía Inteligente here. I also prepared a very short presentation. So, do you see the screen?
Yes, we do. And I have to say that I love the colors in your presentation. Amazing.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Okay. So, very short. I want to tell you a bit more about our organization, in case somebody doesn't know it yet. So it's called Ciudadanía Inteligente, and we strengthen democracies in Latin America. That's kind of our mission. And in a very short way, we define ourselves as an inclusive and feminist organization that fights for social justice and the transformation of democracy. We have more than 11 years of experience working in Latin America, and particularly in Chile, and we work with an interdisciplinary and international team. What I wanted to talk about here it's projects that work during the complete political cycle. So after 11 years, we have realized that we didn't thought about it in the beginning, but that we were trying to address the whole political cycle, not only one moment. So we have like enriched our tools and try to see them increasingly in a more comprehensive way. So we have tools for before elections, we have tools for during elections and after elections. And I think this connects with one of the questions we have for this panel, that it's about democracy, power, and technology, because elections are kind of a central element of democracy. So if you don't see or talk about the complete cycle, you miss something. And I brought examples. For instance, Vota Inteligente or Vote Smart is a tool that works better before and during elections, because it allows citizens and civil society organizations to make proposals that candidates can commit to. But this can change. For instance, now we have a new version of this project at the constitutional process in Chile, and is to submit proposals to the conventional members. So you can adapt it to different political processes, but it's before and during the process. And then between the elections, we have tools such as the Dicho al Hecho or the Observatory Anti-Corruption, which are different ways of measuring and tracking progress of the political agenda. It's an agenda that you can make as an organization or as an advocacy organization, or the agenda that the government puts himself, like the program, for instance. So if they have a program, you can monitor the program. And I put here some visuals so that you imagine the websites, although you can access, of course, the links. But for instance, this is Vota Inteligente. And now we have just here the current president of Chile, because he had 15 commitments. And you can see with whom he committed, what is the topic. And unfortunately, we couldn't secure funding to track the commitments, but the reality is that he hasn't done much. So you can also see what has happened in these areas. These are different kinds of commitments. Another one is what I call the Dicho al Hecho. And here it's a tracking tool for the commitments the government made. So during the elections, they have a program. So we take the program and we analyze it with a methodology. And it's interesting because the dream of this project is that then, because we can make a general analysis, but not go into a qualitative analysis, because you cannot be expert in like 15 areas of government, like technology, transport, education, rights of women, etc. So the dream will be that each specialized organization will do del Dicho al Hecho for their topic. And we have achieved that, more or less. For instance, there has been del Dicho al Hecho only for issues related with children and how children's rights are protected. So for us, that is a success. That something like that's happened. And another version of this one is the Observatory Anti-Corruption, but this can be used for several ways. Like you can use it for tracking almost anything. And we like it. It's different from the Dicho al Hecho because it allows for more depth, because you can also track a quality of the project, and it's more complex. So we recommend this for more specific advocacy agendas. We did this with another organization, Espacio Público in Chile, to track the agenda against corruption. So we had a lot of information. It was complicated to visualize it. So for that kind of things, it's good. The Dicho al Hecho is more simple, but both are very similar and they work in this way. I also had some challenges and lessons to bring to the panel for the discussion later. So one, it has to do with, I summarize it as technology can bring us together. And it's something that we in the organization call the sociological turn, because it was related with a sociologist taking over the executive director back in 2014, I believe. where he and then the organization realized that we couldn't go on building these platforms because you cannot secure participation or engagement if you don't have a community around it. So for instance, in Chile, the El Dicho al Hecho works because it's well known. The press waits for it to work, and the less important part is the website. It's more the headlines. It's that many people know the project and not our organization. And the government asked us, how did we do it in the El Dicho al Hecho, because they kind of fear which the result is, because it can make noise. If you don't have that, some organizations have come to us and say, I want to do a El Dicho al Hecho of whatever, I don't know, housing. And I say, like, are you sure? Because you have to have people around the project that make it visible. If not, you're going to work a lot, and maybe it's better to do a document or what, I don't know, like something like that. The second is that alliances matter. There were some questions around inclusion, and we need to work with other organizations, movements, and even collectives to be successful, because we have to be honest. Ciudadanía Inteligente is an organization mainly based in Santiago de Chile, the capital. We are, the majority of us, privileged. We have education. We don't work or live in a suburb or maybe in a region that is distant from the city. So, and we don't have the possibility, because we don't have resources to work, for instance, at the grassroots level. So we cannot say that we are like a movement or a grassroots organization. And the only way to make other people participate in our platforms is to make alliances with people that do that. So for instance, in the Vota Inteligente project, we have alliances with organizations that actually work in other regions and with people on the ground. And they went with the methodology and asked them, what proposals do you want? And sometimes they wrote it on paper and then they put them on the platform. Because sometimes there was no internet connection, etc. So I think that alone you cannot do it. So you have to articulate a huge network with others, because it's not, I don't believe that it's one organization that can do it alone. And the other is that, how do you define success? What is success? And I was thinking about at least 3 ways. When you are not needed anymore. For instance, some of our projects, the original Vota Inteligente, we don't do it anymore because the government does it. It's like a transparent candidate or something. It's a very funny name. But the thing is that they have the information there, and we don't do it anymore because it's not needed anymore, or others do it for you. Then when others come to you, for instance, we are very happy when some organizations come and they want to do the Dicho al Hecho in a more specific way, because it means that it's working, and that if they have resources to do it, it's great. And when you provide a space to work together, we have also realized that now people know us as the organization that can do a platform and brings others together and have this kind of articulator role with alliances, and everyone can come to this space. And for us, that's also kind of a success. Maybe there are other ways, but this is the way we at the moment are thinking about success. And that's it. Thank you. And I will stop sharing the screen.
Thank you. Before I pass the mic to Hal, when you were talking about success and this part of we're not needed anymore, I thought of a previous panel that we had where one of the questions was, what was the utopia? The utopian universe for you? And one of the panelists said, I want to be in a prairie where my work is not needed anymore. So like, that's my utopia, and that's when I know that my work has been done, when I can be sitting on the beach and the work that I'm doing is not needed. It's done already. So yeah, that reminded me a lot of that, definitely. So Hal, tell us about your project.
Okay, thank you for introducing. Yeah, hello guys, I'm Hal from Code Japan. I also explain about the Dissident, as I mentioned. And before starting about the Dissident, let me explain about the Code for Japan itself a bit. And yeah, before, the Code for Japan's vision is to build a society by thinking and creating together with diverse people. And such a society requires a safe place that makes this possible. We encourage individuals to think, act, and connect on that trust. So we are creating communities where people can openly connect and create their ideal society. It is essential to think about what kind of society do we want. Our community is not only for IT engineers. It requires a wide range of people, including government, students, NPOs, private sectors, and students. Then we promote to start project to make a prototype, test the concept, and implement the ideas as sustainable services. One of our focusing areas is Make Our City project. It is a challenge to redefine a smart city concept by citizen participation. But why do we need to redefine the concept of smart city? In Japan, many smart city projects are happening in several cities, but most of them are testbed projects planned by municipalities and enterprise companies. Also, local national governments tend to pay for fancy tech solutions like autonomous car or drone deliveries or health tech and so on. Many smart city projects are appealing efficiency and convenience or productivity. But is it true? I don't think so. I believe that the purpose of city planning is citizens' well-being. Focusing efficiency too much may harm the citizens' sense of well-being, I think. For avoiding such misdirection, we started the Make Our City project. We improve students' well-being through citizen-centered city planning, starting from myself. We are developing a platform for prototyping with diverse students and researching a data-driven decision-making process. And also we are providing citizen participatory city planning methods. Currently, we are running 2 projects for 3 municipalities, and one project with Smart City Institute of Japan. It is researching about the well-being city index. But in this session, let me introduce Decidim in this presentation. About, as M already mentioned, the Decidim is citizen engagement tools. It was born in Barcelona, and we localized that platform into Japanese. And the Decidim provides many functions about the student participatory process. We used some features of Decidim for some cities. We launched the first instance for Kakogawa City last year. Then Hyogo Prefecture and some other organizations also used our platform to create policies or gather ideas from citizens. The private sector is also using it. During the planning period in Kakogawa City's Smart City policy, we also organized an offline workshop with citizens. I realized this kind of intensive workshop is essential to collect student voices. And we put the workshop's result to the Decidim so that people can see what kind of discussion was happened in the workshop. And this kind of online workshop feedback loop is necessary if we want to create a city consensus. In the first 2 months since we started Decidim in Kakogawa, it is worth noting that the participation of teenagers is over 40% of attendees. traditional methods of involvement, such as town meeting, would not have yielded such result, I think. But we just started our journey. There are still a lot of unanswered questions, like how can we involve students widely, or student participation process requires a lot of work by municipal officials. So how to convince them to use this kind of participation process, and also how we can create a safe space for constructive discussions. What if the students argues, and it's happening very big difficulties about constructive talk, and also what kind of topics is applicable for this kind of process. So yeah, I'm very looking forward to having the discussion with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hal. And we have a question, but I'm gonna pass the mic to Alma so she can tell about her project. And afterwards, Micah, we're gonna jump into your question.
Hey everyone. So my name is Alma. I'm from Codeando Mexico. Thanks for having us here and for opening this space to talk about tech and democracy. First, we are a community-based organization in Mexico. This means that even though we have a core team that kind of has day-to-day roles and tasks, we also have a community of volunteers around the organization that help and work with us to accomplish the mission. We basically seek to strengthen teams that are already working in the public space, either in collectives, civil society organizations, or public institutions, with projects that use data and technology to amplify their impact. So in this sense, I actually was thinking about telling you a project about legislation, but I was very interested in M's and Hal's presentations because we have already used not Decidim, but Consul in participatory budgeting. So it's going to be an interesting discussion after this presentation. But first, I wanted to talk about a project in a local Congress we did this year, because I think when we think about democracy, we usually think about executive powers, right? Because it's the first place where citizens kind of get in touch with the governments. But there's also the judicial and the legislative, which are harder to know as a citizen because we don't exactly know how we can participate or engage with those powers. So to start the story of this project, I want to tell you that in 2015, so 6 years ago, we started seeing this problem. So a person in the community built an amazing app that was called Representantes Patito, or fake representatives in Mexico, that aimed to do the following. So you inputted your address and the app told you what your local representative, state representative, and federal representative were. So this is very hard to do in Mexico. Like even as someone that's interested in politics and etc., if you're not really like into politics a lot, if I ask you what your 4 representatives are, it's very hard for someone to know, and there's no single place where you can go and look for it and know what they're doing or anything else, right? So this project was very nice and it died very fast. Why did it die very fast? Because data was not around. So what the project did was actually go through each Congress's page, extract data, and pull it up on a web page. But Congress websites are not really like well done. And data varies a lot from Congress to Congress. Sometimes they upload data as images or PDFs, sometimes as Excel sheets, sometimes as a subpage within the website. So the website really quickly died because it was impossible to maintain that much scalpers to be able to kind of go around each Congress's website and check them out every week just to see if they were working the same, etc. Right? So it's been 5 years, and every year someone in the community says, I want to build this project. And the problem is always the same. So last year, we had the opportunity to start working with a local congress in Mexico, the Jalisco Local Congress. And we worked with the National Democratic Institute, the Mexican office. And we started working from scratch. So what we did in this period of time, which were like 6 months, was actually for the first time sitting down with the Congress and kind of identifying the entirety of data they had and what type of data and how they worked it and why they had it that way. And we worked with administrative staff, we worked with legal staff, we worked with representatives to kind of get the full picture, right? So during these 6 months, we tracked the data, we established a plan, we passed the first open legislative policy in Mexico because we passed it through Congress, and they built their first portal. But this was kind of the beginning. What we saw throughout this project was first that we needed to also open the project. So one of the things Codeando does is opening the project, not just in terms of code and in terms of data, but we also open the process. So in this process, we also kind of open spaces for discussion with the community itself so that they could tell us what they thought was necessary, because they had been working in this project for the past 5 years. They had been trying to build it from the outside. And in tandem with both the Congress, the NDI, and the community, we started building an open legislative standard, which right now we're still testing. And throughout the process, several congresses, like the Open Data Charter and congresses from, for example, Argentina, kind of came to us and said, like, yes, we need that. We're also working on that in several spaces in Latin America. So the outcome of this project, like the particular project in Jalisco, was actually a guide for any Congress to actually track, like, check out what their data was and be able to know which data should they open. But we're also continuing to work on the open legislative standard. So if there's anyone here around that's really interested in the legislative and kind of also has the same problems, we would love to chat. So the outcome was actually a guide in Spanish, but I'm gonna put it in the chat if anyone wants to see it and understand Spanish. Yeah, so for us, like a lot of what Hal, and Colombina has said resonate a lot in terms of building community and building trust processes, because I think the most important part of kind of working with tech and democracy is understanding like who you're impacting, how to build community around it, and how to build trust processes, because trust processes are very hard and technology cannot replace them. So we need to understand in which part of the process technology comes in and aids those objectives without being the center of the project. So in our case, for example, technology was also the least important part of a project. I think it has always been. But it's still important to kind of build infrastructure, right? Because a lot of the projects we build, which are websites and like maybe projects that aim directly to citizenship, sometimes do not change the digital infrastructure we kind of need to make them live for more time, or to make them sustainable, or to make them usable. So I think this is why I chose to talk about this project, because it's something that's not as fancy and it definitely doesn't have the same kind of, I think, media impact, but it's also kind of really important to build upon in the future. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to the questions, Sophia.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I have to say that as being a former member of Codeando Mexico, I feel what Alma is saying very deep, because I was there in some of the discussions. Thank you so much for sharing that. So I'm going to read, we have 2 questions and I think they're very related. So from Micah, it says, from a non-tech savvy user, how easy have you found Decidim to use? And in this case, I would also brought it up to decision-making platforms. Either it would be Decidim, it would be Console, or another platform that doesn't fall into like this too, but that works on the idea of decision-making processes. So do people understand it easily, or do you need a lot of explaining? Do you need a lot of capacity building? And this relates to another question that we had in the chat, which is, what are the limitations of these platforms? Especially on the idea of discussing and developing ideas. I know there are a lot of things in here, so I'm just going to put the question in the table, and who wants to take the lead on this, the mic is open.
So let me explain about the Decidim situation. At first, the users had to learn the concept of the participatory process itself. It is not regarding to tech knowledge. So it was difficult for us to let people understand the processes. So we created the presentations about about the whole process of the participation. So after that, we organized sessions and explain how to use Decidim to the people. And also the user interface can be improved to make it useful, I think. We found a smartphone interface seemed easier to use. And younger people were able to start using without explanations, but it might be difficult to use for senior people.
I'll go really quickly if that's on the Decidim side. I would agree with that, and there's sort of a civic knowledge that people don't necessarily have that specifically, I think, with that platform, probably similar ones too. We're used to democracy meaning voting, but in here there's proposals and assemblies and consultations and things that we might not necessarily know. So I feel like the vocabulary is kind of a key learning that participants might have to do.
Thank you. I'm going to pass it to Colombina.
Yeah, we used Decidim for another organization working in Chile, and they were trying to make people on the territories, and that means outside of Santiago and on the ground, to provide like content for the constitutional discussion, to prepare the ground, I would say. And it was a very complicated experience, and from various aspects. First, we worked with Decidim, and we thought that we were going to use the software more, and in the end we ended up using something different. So probably we didn't assess the platform well. We thought that it was going to be useful, but for actually what this organization wanted to do was not. But the problem was that at the beginning they also were not sure of what they wanted to do, and then the pandemic came, so it was difficult. And in the end, the platform didn't look like Decidim at all. It was different, and it could have been done with Google Forms or something like that, I believe. And the other problem was that even when this organization hired people in charge of each region of the country so that they could help each territory to organize and to put the proposals, in the end, to just tell them how to use the software, so that we have to train them, and they had to train the local the people working with the local communities. So it takes a lot of time and resources, and usually that's the part that nobody thinks about before. And so then in the end we said it could have been easier to do it with Google spreadsheet basically, and a form, and in the meetings people taking notes, because people was happier doing it that way. And we also use something similar to DCM, but DCM was not around yet, or we have another platform, or we didn't know about it yet, in a local council in Santiago. And there it was, I think, something that I don't remember who said, but about small projects. It was M. So that the project was smaller, and it was very specific, like how do we want to build this new park, and design it and implement it. So there was like 400 people around the park, not more, and they had to participate. And there I think it worked better. And also we had a lot of on the ground work, and even people with computers and with the government, local government, and for instance, women 50 years old, a lot of household work, no internet connection, or maybe just the phone from the daughter. They will not go into the platform, so they sit there and somebody took notes. So that was our experience, at least. And it's very important to have like a manual and a methodology, and to share that with the people who are going to organize this, because if not, people don't know what to discuss about. So usually we have like a methodology and a manual, so that people can use it in the before and prepare the meeting. So yeah, it takes a lot of work and time in our experience.
Thank you. Alma?
Yeah, I think our context is similar to Colombina's, probably more similar to Colombina's and M's or Hal's. We have used both Decidim and Consul, which is Decidim was made by Barcelona, Consul was made by Madrid, but they're basically both made thinking about Spain's local processes. I think for starters, Decidim, I think we can see this in two ways. One is the technical implementation. And I would say if you don't have a technical team, it would be hard to implement either Consul or Decidim, because you have to build your instance, etc. So that on the part of kind of actually building the instance. And then both platforms have an administrator, which someone who's non-technical can use. I would agree with Colombina. For example, we made a participatory budgeting process here in Mexico. We worked in one of the richest municipalities in the country, the richest municipality in the country, and we still were conscious that a lot of people were being left behind. So from the beginning of the project, we were conscious that we would have to make a huge offline effort to kind of bring them in, because you also have to consider when you're doing democratic processes, at least coming from public institutions, you cannot afford the luxury of leaving people out. You kind of have to ensure participation. So yeah, we built like a very strong offline process, and we still had some things we didn't consider. For example, people who were high in socioeconomic status but were older didn't even have an email. So we had to build a hotline where people could call every day, and you would walk people through the process of actually making an email and then making an account in the platform to kind of be able to vote. But I think it depends a lot on the type of process you're building. If you need to, for example, verify users or not, if you need to, like I think if it's open and you just need kind of questions answered, we have also found that forms work a lot better than kind of building the whole platform. And then I also agree with Hal in the sense that it takes a lot of education to actually kind of convey why you're building participatory processes and what they are getting when they're participating, because we're not used to having participation beyond voting. So I think most of the problem is kind of setting correct expectations, because you also want them to participate, but you don't want them to think that just because they kind of submitted an idea, then you're going to do it, and then you're going to lose that person forever in another participatory process. So it's also, like I mentioned, like a trust building process, no? And how you communicate and kind of put in place the steps in the methodology to be very clear and also promote participation.
Thank you, definitely. And yeah, I think one of the things that you have all mentioned is this part on like, how do we think, or how do we include all of the different sectors that, because we know that there are going to be parts of the society or sectors in a population that are going to be excluded just by us wanting to integrate this tech tool. So yeah, it's very important to have like this offline strategy that goes hand by hand with the online strategy to make that work and to try to include everyone in the conversation as possible. We have another question that I think is very interesting. It says, the number of people using a decision-making platform will affect the legitimacy of voting on the platform. How many citizens need to use this platform to say that the process is legitimate? Chan, 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 hard questions, hard questions in this panel.
I think I'll pose, I don't know that any of our processes that we've described here would have done voting only on one platform, or only one way for people to engage. So it's really hard because I think the biggest limitation is that you have to add on to what you're already doing. It's like you have the offline, you have methods of engagement, and then you're adding on another, but you're not taking away something else. And that's where it takes a lot of effort. So it's, I don't know that we would ever have something that's only offered in one place.
Yeah, I would agree with Em. For example, Kakogawa City is planning process is connected to Decidim, but Decidim is early stage collecting ideas period we used. And after Decidim, we used Decidim and collect many feedbacks. It will, the output goes to the general process of policy making, and final part, they also have a public hearing process that that was existing by email. So I don't think that Decidim will change the games so far. So it's, yeah, if we get many citizen feedbacks, maybe it will have more power, but still it is small actions in so far.
Thank you, Colombina.
Yes, I agree with M in the sense that this is complementary, and in fact this is a tricky question, a political question, and kind of a thing that the political scientists fight about. For instance, at the moment in the Constitutional Convention, it's been talking a lot about participatory democracy. And one of the challenges of participatory democracy is to define who the demos is, or who the people are in a particular decision. So if you're going to decide on, for instance, reproductive rights, who votes? Women? Anyone can vote? Who is, because it's a tricky question, because of course we are a country, so everyone could vote, but why, you could argue, why is a man going to decide on women's rights? So it gets very, very tricky. And those are the kind of conversations that we are having, and we are advocates of participatory democracy, of course, but not only the participatory democracy. So it's very complicated, and it has very nuances. So I believe the same goes for technology in this case, because it's online, and you will always going to exclude people, but include others. So I think first the rules should be clear from the beginning. So if you make a participatory process and you say, well, the way to participate is this, but also as a government, you have to ensure that it's not exclusion the way you are planning it. So it's tricky, especially in places where you have a society that's not so homogeneous in terms of access to resources, to internet, etc. So the rules should be clear at the beginning, and the process, as everyone has said, and also education in the sense that why you should participate. So I think it's a very good question, but it goes, even without technology, you have the same problem. So when a decision is legitimate, and what does it make it legitimate? Now it's even a problem from all democracies in terms of elections, because it seems to be that the elections are not enough to make governments legitimate anymore. So I think technology can be like a component of the complicated scenario we're facing.
Definitely. Alma?
Yeah, I agree with Colombina. I think the type of process, not only kind of the results, but the process itself and the way it's handled kind of speaks about legitimacy. For example, in terms of participatory budgeting, part of the project being legitimate was not only the fact that more people participated because more people participated, but the fact that for once the project was open. So the entire process was available to be kind of tracked. And that didn't depend on the amount of people that participate. We also, since we're like democracy, participatory democracy is complex, and we are starting to make these exercises. Sometimes you don't have a lot of participation, but it's important to continue making these exercises so more people participate in the future, and so we are able to learn and convey the processes better in the future. At least for us, I think, yes, the process of legitimacy has been around also making the process open and being accountable more than the amount of people that participate in the process, because that's something we cannot control as much as we want to.
Definitely. And I think that that relates a lot to another question that the last question that I'm going to ask before we jump into our rest of our day. But yeah, it bring with this what you were mentioning, Alma, around this is like at the beginning you're not going to have maybe like the greatest turnout, and that relates to something that you have said before about setting the expectations also for ourselves as implementers of a project. And it brought me back to a panel that we had before where we were talking about countering disinformation, and how many of these efforts are countering disinformation are cultural things and are educational things, and there are things that we're not going to be seeing, like the results and the impact is not going to be seen right now, or the changes in culture and the behaviors that we have online are not going to be seen right now, but probably like in 5-10 years. So I think my question right now would be, what have you thought about monitoring these projects or evaluating these projects? How do you know if these projects are working or not? How do you know when is this like the result, even though that you may know that at the beginning it's like you're going to expect like very little participation because this is something new and people are not used to it. But when do you say, okay, this is working and we are seeing that it's working? Complicated questions in this panel.
Yeah, because it kind of comes from what you want to better. For example, in terms of participatory budgeting, we knew it was working because we saw more people participating for the first time. We saw better proposals and proposals coming from every neighborhood in the city, which didn't happen before. We saw more people voting, and so this project has been around for 3 years now, and we have seen an increase in that every year. However, there are sometimes projects where you don't have a baseline. So kind of the success of the project is you actually implementing it for the first time and seeing where it goes and kind of learning and being honest on the process. So I think it depends a lot on the type of project. But I don't know, I want to hear Colombina and Hal.
So Colombina, if you want to go?
Yes. As an example, the project that I presented, the Vote Smart project, is good, I believe, because it could be seen as a complete success. In the elections in 2017, we had hundreds of proposals from different, well, we had some challenges having them from non-urban areas and non-metropolitan region area. We tried to address it the best way we could, but in any case, we had lots of proposals. We had a book of proposals. We delivered the book to the candidates. We arranged for all the candidatures to have to be on the website. So I think there were 9 that year. The 9 were there because for us it's usually easy to have the center left parties join because they feel more attracted or I don't know, the participation, but in this case even the right and right wing, all of them were there and they all committed to citizen proposals. We had a children's section for teenagers and children, and they did a lot of proposals and even some of the candidates committed with them. So it was very nice in that sense, and it was a very successful project, but in the end, that was there. And there was no funding to make the following up and to track what happened with those commitments. So that's why then we said, well, we have a huge problem because these people trusted in this platform and they use it to participate. And one that we want to tell them now, because because we had another one before with local elections, and this was a coincidence, but the sister of one of our developers was one of the lucky persons that made a proposal and the local government committed with it, the mayor. And she was very happy, but she didn't know what to do because the mayor didn't do it. And she lived it's a small town. And what does she do alone? Like, please do what you promised to do. Nothing happened. So then we realized it was better to work with organizations because they understand the logics better, but still organizations not always have the resources to make this following up. So it's a very tricky question. From one perspective, it's a very successful project, but for us, thinking more about impact and what our idea of democracy is on how the cycle should work is not so much anymore. So now we want to do it a bit differently if we do it again. And we will take these lessons from the beginning into account.
Hal, if you want to take a lead on this.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I would measure the impacts by seeing how many excluded people are involved into policy-making process. For example, in Kakogawa City, there were many the high school students sent their voices, and it was not happening before we started using dissident. So that was really good example, and they put very good opinions and positive feedback to the city planning process, city's draft of policies. And I think in the long term, that kind of positive feedback loop will make the decision-making process more open. Then the city will have better policies, and the students contribute, and they could get the student contributions more. That's all.
Thank you, Hal. I don't know if you want to share something.
I think I agree with what everyone else is saying here. And I think that it kind of the question of success also, if I were to have a perfect measurement, is trust. And that's also a really hard thing to measure. But I think in our case, we're more looking at like who participates, and we have working with kind of a higher technology literacy among the people who participated. But ultimately it does come down to trust. So I think, are they going to this process to voice a need or a problem? Are they using the tools that we're introducing to kind of address some of those, or are they using other mechanisms, or going on Twitter to share problems they have? Like, I think that's that gets at trust too. So that's something I would like to talk about more, but I know we don't have much more time.
Thank you so much. We actually we're run out of time. We still have a question, but I'm gonna put this question in. We have a summit channel in the Code for All Slack. I'm gonna put here in the chat different things. So for me, closing up, first of all, I just want to thank you, thank all of you who joined, and thank you, Hal, Colombina, and Alma, for this discussion. It was really interesting, and thank you so much for sharing all of your thoughts, experiences, and feedback. Also, well, today was the third day of the summit. With this session, we end up the third day, but tomorrow we have 2 more sessions. So I invite you to take a look at the agenda, check the sessions that we have tomorrow. We're very interested. And also take a look at the different lightning talks that we have in the YouTube channel and different things that we have been uploading there. You are going to be able to find a recording of the session in our YouTube channel, and there's a link in the chat. And if you like what you saw today, there are 2 ways of continuing this conversation. First of all is you can join the Code for All community. It's open for everyone who wants to join in. There's this link on the Slack space there. So if you want to join, just please join our Slack. And in there, we have a summit channel. We're going to be posting information. I'm going to be posting the question that remained open for this panel. So also if one of the speakers wants to jump in and answer that there. So the idea for that channel is to continue the conversations even after the summit has passed over, and to share thoughts, reflections that came out from all of the sessions that we have. And also you can subscribe to our newsletter to receive updates of the members' work, what they're doing, their focus, things that we're doing in the network. It's a bi-monthly newsletter, and in the chat you are going to be able to find the link there. And last but not least, we would love your feedback on this session and all of the sessions we have had at the summit. This helps us a lot to make the summit more interactive, engaging, and also to select the topics that we want to focus on for next year. So please share your feedback with us. And thank you so much. I thank you for the person who said that I'm such a great host. Thank you. I love talking to people. So thank you so much. And I hope you stay tuned. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Sophia. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. See you.
Thank you.